In the year 2471, Earth had finally reached the stars, but not on equal footing with the ancient powers that ruled them. After years of careful planning, study, and cautious development, humanity stood before the Galactic Council for the very first time. The council chamber was a colossal structure floating above a blue star, surrounded by a transparent dome that shimmered with starlight. Delegates from hundreds of alien civilizations, some billions of years old, watched from floating seats that spiraled upward like rings of a great cosmic tree. At the center stood Earth's ambassador, Riley Monroe, wearing a crisp navy suit and an expression that masked both her nerves and her plan. Behind her stood a small delegation, silent and alert. Riley took a deep breath and spoke clearly, requesting that Earth be recognized as a sovereign species, one deserving of full council membership and voting rights. Her voice echoed in the chamber, translated instantly into 100 languages, some of which sounded more like music or ripples than speech. For a moment there was silence, then laughter. Deep, rolling, unfiltered amusement erupted from all corners of the council. Some aliens chuckled telepathically, others howled through gills or clicked through shells. To them, humans were infants, barely crawling in the cosmic playground. One delegate even waved a tentacle dismissively. But it was the head of the council, an ancient being named Jarin, who made the moment sting. Floating in a halo of light, his tall, translucent form pulsed as he addressed the humans directly. "Earth is a quaint little experiment in chaos," he said, his voice like wind through glass. "You've only just discovered faster-than-light travel. Your species fights over land it doesn't understand. Your climate teeters on collapse. And now you want to decide the fate of galaxies?" More laughter followed. Riley stood still, her expression calm. She did not argue. She did not respond with anger. Instead, she watched them closely. Their arrogance, their certainty, the way they barely saw humans as more than a curiosity. After a moment, Sharon waved a shimmering hand. "Petition denied. Earth may return in a few centuries, if it's still standing." The floor beneath the humans gently shifted, preparing to move them back to their waiting ship. Riley turned. Her steps measured, but those close to her noticed a quiet smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. She had expected this. She had counted on it. Outside the chamber, as they boarded their small but efficient transport ship, one of her aides whispered, "They didn't even let us finish." Riley nodded slowly. "They laughed," she said softly. "That's the best start we could have hoped for." She stared out the viewport as stars stretched into lines, thinking of everything humanity had prepared. The data, the secrets, the truth the council wasn't ready to face. This wasn't over. In fact, it had just begun. Back on Earth, as the stars faded from the ship's windows and the atmosphere wrapped around them once again, Ambassador Riley Monroe and her team returned not in defeat, but in quiet determination. The laughter of the Galactic Council still echoed in their minds, but it only confirmed what they had always known, that the Council was too comfortable, too proud, and far too certain that no child species could ever challenge them. But Riley and her team had been preparing for this moment long before their request had been denied. In hidden archives buried beneath the Earth's surface, in research stations cloaked in digital silence, and in deep space probes that had been quietly watching for decades, humanity had gathered something the Council had never expected: records. These were not just simple logs or rumors, but real evidence: classified transmissions, intercepted communications, and forgotten data trails that revealed a history far darker than the Council ever admitted. High-ranking members of the Galactics. Council, some praised as great leaders, had secretly broken the very laws they claimed to enforce. Riley's analysts had uncovered reports of entire pre-FTL civilizations being wiped out under the false name of containment. Other species were manipulated into war, stripped of their natural resources, or forced into silence through advanced mental conditioning. The crimes were old, but the proof was sharp, and it cut through the illusion of the Council's nobility like a blade through mist. Riley stood in the center of Earth's Global Strategy Command, surrounded by screens showing alien faces, encrypted files, and holographic projections of planets lost to time. Her team was made up of scientists, historians, cybersecurity experts, and even former diplomats who had once believed in the Council's vision. Now, they believed in something else: justice. As word of their discoveries spread quietly among trusted allies, something unexpected began to happen. Small, fringe alien groups, some who had long been ignored or pushed aside, began reaching out. Messages arrived from deep corners of the galaxy, coded and careful, expressing silent support. These species, once alone, had noticed Earth's rapid progress. In just a few centuries, humanity had gone from rocket fuel to quantum drives, from basic computing to sentient AIs who chose to help rather than conquer. Earth's technology wasn't traditional by alien standards. It was adaptive, unpredictable, and surprisingly efficient. While the Council focused on massive fleets and ancient protocols, humanity built smarter systems, agile tools, and defenses that evolved faster than any prediction model. Earth didn't just grow, it leapt. The Council had laughed at their progress, but now, some were beginning to look again, this time with caution. Riley walked past a row of data cores humming with live analysis. She knew this wasn't a war of weapons. It was a war of truths, and humanity was learning how to fight it well. They didn't need to shout or threaten. They just needed to show the galaxy what had been hidden for so long. Her plan wasn't just to reveal the past, but to reshape the future. If the Council wouldn't let Earth have a voice, then Earth would become the voice for those who were silenced. As Riley reviewed the files and watched the first threads of quiet alliance form beyond Earth's orbit, she realized the Council had made one critical mistake. They thought humans would back down after a laugh. But humans remembered. Humans adapted. And humans, once dismissed, had just started writing a record that the galaxy would not be able to ignore. The second appearance of Earth's delegation at the Galactic Council was unlike the first. This time, there was no nervous tension, no uncertain glances, only quiet focus and a sense of something about to shift. Ambassador Riley Monroe walked into the Great Chamber with her team behind her, carrying not hope for approval, but proof of betrayal. The same towering council members sat in their orbits, still cloaked in confidence, but their laughter was a little slower this time. Riley stepped onto the central platform, raised her hand calmly, and began to speak, not with emotion, but with cold precision. One by one, she unveiled the records Earth had gathered. Encrypted messages, illegal orders, and undeniable data showing how key members of the Council had broken the very laws they were sworn to protect. A stillness fell over the chamber. The air shimmered with translated whispers. Riley then displayed an ancient document, a copy of the original Council Charter, an old law book that many species had long stopped reading, believing it to be outdated and irrelevant. But not the humans. Deep in that book was a forgotten clause, the Trial of Flames, a rarely used and nearly mythical challenge that allowed any species, regardless of age or status, to question the Council's decisions through a series of 3 trials: diplomacy, innovation, and, if required, military strength. It was a test of not just power, but of vision, will, and adaptability. Riley declared Earth's intent to invoke it. Murmurs broke out, some surprised, some amused. Council. Hedjarin leaned forward, his glowing eyes narrowing. "You invoke the trial?" he asked, more curious than angry. Riley answered with a calm nod. "By the Council's own founding laws, Earth has the right to challenge your judgment." For a moment, silence returned. Then came the laughter. It wasn't as loud as before, but it was there, the sound of arrogance, of ancient beings sure of their superiority. They believed Earth would lose each trial. In diplomacy, they thought humans too emotional. In innovation, they thought humans too reckless. And in military strength, they believed Earth's small fleet would be no match for the advanced warships of 1,000 civilizations. They accepted the challenge, eager to embarrass humanity a second time, to prove that youth and boldness could never replace age and control. But something had changed. A few council members no longer laughed. Some leaned forward, eyes focused, wondering how a young species could have uncovered hidden laws, unearthed forgotten crimes, and dared to use ancient traditions as weapons. Others exchanged silent glances, remembering how quickly humans had advanced, how unpredictable their strategies had become, and how quiet their rise truly was. Riley noticed this. She didn't need to win over the entire council. Not yet. She just needed to plant doubt, to show the galaxy that Earth would not be dismissed so easily. As she stood at the center of the room, framed by the symbols of the council's highest law, she reminded them that humanity did not come to beg, but to stand. The date for the first trial was set. The arena for diplomacy would open in just one moon cycle. As Riley turned to leave, her voice rang out one last time, calm and clear. You believe humans are too new, too small, too scattered to matter. But history doesn't care about age. It remembers those who changed the game. With that, she stepped off the platform, the eyes of the galaxy beginning to follow her every move, and for the first time, not everyone was laughing. The arena for the first trial was unlike anything on Earth, a neutral space station suspended between two binary stars, built for balance, designed for peace, and silent for centuries. Here, the trial of minds would take place, and humanity's task was as difficult as it was delicate, to resolve a deep and bitter conflict that had burned between two ancient species, the Vorak and the Dalari, for over 400 years. There, hatred ran so deep that even the Galactic Council, with all its power and influence, had failed to bring peace between them. The Vorak were a proud warrior race, tall and armored, with a deep code of honor and a long memory of betrayal. The Dalari were graceful, telepathic beings of light and sound, known for their advanced knowledge and sharp judgment. But they had never forgiven the Vorak for destroying one of their sacred moons during a forgotten war. Peace talks had collapsed dozens of times. Delegates had walked out. Violence had almost broken out on council grounds. And now, humanity, a young and inexperienced species, was expected to succeed where hundreds had failed. Riley Monroe entered the negotiation chamber without guards, without weapons, and without the usual political theater. She brought only a tablet filled with historical records, Earth's greatest diplomatic case studies, and a quiet confidence. That came from understanding more than just policy. It came from understanding people. She didn't speak first. Instead, she listened. For hours, she let the Vorak and Dalari vent their pain, list their losses, and declare why peace was impossible. Most council diplomats before her had interrupted, trying to control the conversation. Riley didn't. She took notes, asked questions, and waited. Then, she showed them something they hadn't expected. Images from Earth's own violent past. She told stories of once enemies who became allies, of long wars that ended with words, not weapons. She spoke of the Cold War, of peace in Ireland, of the rebuilding of nations after destruction. And then she surprised them again by offering a third path. Riley proposed the creation of a shared space between the Vorak and Dalari, a neutral world where both could send their youth for learning, for culture, for rebuilding trust through future generations rather than forced treaties. She called it the Bridge Accord, and she tied it to both species' values, the Vorak's respect for strength through unity, and the Dalari's desire for knowledge and connection. She didn't try to erase their pain. She acknowledged it, respected it, and then offered them a reason to step forward, not for themselves, but for their descendants. There was tension in the room. At one point, the Vorik general slammed a fist on the table. The Dalari high voice shimmered in warning. But Riley remained calm, steady, and patient. Over days of quiet discussion, cultural exchange, and private dialogue, the mood began to change. Old wounds didn't heal, but something else took their place. Curiosity, and perhaps the smallest spark of hope. When the two leaders finally stood and placed their hands on the same accord document, witnessed by members of the council and representatives of dozens of species, the chamber fell into complete silence. There was no applause, just stunned silence. For the first time in centuries, the Vorik and Dalari had agreed to peace, not because they were forced to, but because they chose to. Riley had done what no one thought possible. As she stepped back from the table, her face calm and unreadable, she glanced up at the gallery where council members watched. Some leaned forward, some whispered to each other, and none of them were laughing anymore. Earth had passed the first trial, not with power or tricks, but with understanding, with history, and with something the galaxy had long forgotten, the human gift for empathy in the face of endless division. The second trial took place in the cold, silent void between stars, inside a vast simulation field known as the Arena of Steel, where digital battles were as real as any war. The Galactic Council had chosen the rules. Each species would control a simulated version of their fleet in a war game designed to test strategy, speed, and survival. Earth's delegation arrived with nothing flashy, no heavy cruisers or terrifying weapons to boast. Compared to the other species, Earth's simulated fleet looked small, almost fragile. But Riley Monroe stood calmly in the control chamber, eyes steady as she activated Project Helios, humanity's most advanced military program. Developed in secret over decades, Helios was not about size. It was about thinking. It was powered by quantum-threaded artificial intelligence, a new kind of AI that could make independent decisions across the battlefield in real time, working like a hive mind that adapted faster than any alien tech. Every ship was lined with adaptive nanotechnology, allowing them to shift form, disguise signals, repair damage mid-fight, and change tactics instantly. The other species entered the simulation with confidence, some even mocking Earth's entry. The opening rounds began with overwhelming attacks on the human fleet. Missiles, energy bursts, and coordinated formations rushed toward the small, agile ships Earth had deployed. But instead of returning fire immediately, the human ships scattered like sparks in the wind, slipping into enemy blind spots, using strange flight patterns, and responding not with brute force, but with strange, unpredictable moves. Council spectators frowned in confusion. These weren't traditional formations. Earth didn't seem to follow any known tactical rule. Instead, their fleet moved like a living puzzle, constantly shifting, bending, tricking, and outmaneuvering. Some enemy fleets wasted firepower chasing ghost signals. Others fell into traps that hadn't even existed seconds earlier. One by one, larger ships were isolated, confused, and destroyed in the simulation. Not by strength, but by precision. Riley stood behind her command team, silent, watching Earth's systems outplay centuries-old strategies like a grandmaster, moving through a game of chess. The final blow came when Earth's fleet, which had appeared to be retreating, folded space in a sudden micro-jump maneuver and reappeared directly behind the leading enemy flagship. Before the Council could even react, the simulation blinked and declared the match over. Earth had won, clean, efficient, and completely unexpected. For a long moment, no one spoke. The Council members stared at the results in disbelief. Earth's victory was not luck. It was not a glitch. It was the product of a species that had always faced bigger enemies and found ways to survive, not by copying, but by adapting. Riley finally stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "You expected us to fight like you," she said. "But We don't. We fight like we have something to prove, because we do. She didn't need to say more. The results were on the screen. The murmurs in the chamber were no longer amused or dismissive. They were cautious, even respectful. Some of the council's top military advisors exchanged worried glances. Humanity had shown them something they weren't ready for, a new kind of war, built not on tradition, but on evolution. As Earth's delegation exited the chamber, whispers followed them. The underdogs had just won their second trial. Not with firepower, but with brilliance. The galaxy was beginning to realize something dangerous. Humans were not just different. They were unpredictable, determined, and full of surprises. And the game had officially changed. The final trial was the most dangerous of all. The Galactic Council had grown wary of Earth's unexpected victories. After all, diplomacy and tactics were one thing, but ethics? That was another matter entirely. The Council believed they had found the perfect trap for humanity. They called Riley Monroe to the Great Chamber once more, surrounded by dozens of alien species watching from their seats. This time, however, the air was different. It was heavier, more serious. The Council offered Riley and her team something they hadn't dared offer before: power. They offered Earth influence in the Galactic Council, access to vast resources, and the privilege of a seat at the table. All they had to do in return was keep silent about the corruption they had uncovered, the crimes the Council had committed. At first glance, it seemed like a tempting offer, something that could elevate Earth from a backwater species to one of great power. But Riley Monroe was no fool. She had already seen the Council's true face, and no amount of power could erase the corruption she had witnessed. As the other delegates awaited her response, Riley didn't hesitate. Instead of agreeing to the terms, she turned to the nearest communication terminal and broadcasted the evidence across the galaxy. Live. Billions watched as atrocities, hidden for centuries, were laid bare. The recordings of genocides, the suppression of innocent species, the exploitation of entire planets, all of it came into the light. It was a moment that shook the galaxy to its core. On planets far and wide, the message echoed, sparking outrage, disbelief, and a call for justice. Uprisings began in every corner of the galaxy. Species who had long been oppressed, silenced, or forgotten began to rise up. The very foundation of the Council's power began to crumble. Council member after council member was forced to resign, their faces washed with shame as their decades-old lies came to light. Those who had once mocked humanity now feared them. The public trials that followed exposed the full extent of the ET. Corruption that had run rampant within the Council's ranks. No longer could the Galactic Council claim to be the moral authority of the stars. They were broken, fractured, and discredited. As the chaos unfolded, Riley stood before the masses, the symbol of a new era. The humans, once thought to be the underdogs, were now seen as heroes, symbols of justice, courage, and truth. For the first time, Earth was respected, not for its power, but for its unwavering commitment to the truth. As the dust settled and the galaxy began to reshape itself, an offer was made to Riley Monroe. The remaining factions, desperate for leadership, turned to her. They asked her to lead, to take a place at the helm of this new, reborn alliance of species. But Riley, standing before the vast assembly, shook her head. She had come this far not for power, but for something greater. Her mission had always been to uncover the truth, to bring justice, not to rule. "I didn't fight for a seat at the table," she said, her voice strong but humble. "I fought for every voice to be heard. I fought for a future where we, all of us, can stand together as equals." And with that, Riley Monroe declined the offer. Instead, she chose to return to Earth, knowing that humanity's true strength didn't lie in control, but in the ability to inspire change. The galaxy had been shown its darkest secrets, and in doing so, humanity had forged its place not as conquerors, but as the torchbearers of justice. As Earth's ships returned to their homeworld, the stars felt a little less distant, a little more welcoming. The human story had only just begun. In the wake of the Council's collapse, the galaxy had begun to change. Earth, once dismissed as a young species with nothing to offer, now stood at the forefront of a new era. The Galactic Council, as it had once existed, was no more. It was replaced by a new alliance, one that was radically different, an alliance built on transparency, adaptability, and fairness. No longer would species sit in silence, hiding their corruption behind closed doors. Instead, they would be held accountable, their actions watched, their decisions shared with the entire galaxy. And at the heart of this transformation was humanity. Earth had not only earned a seat at the table, it had redefined what that seat meant. Gone were the days when the galaxy's oldest civilizations ruled with an iron fist. The new alliance was a place where each voice mattered, where new ideas were welcomed, and where change was not feared but embraced. Humans, who had once been laughed at, were now seen as the architects of a new order. They brought with them a fresh perspective, a willingness to listen and adapt, and above all, a deep respect for the value of every species, no matter how old or how young. Riley Monroe stood before the new assembly, her heart steady, her mind focused. It had been a long journey, from the first dismissive laughs in the council chamber to this moment, where she stood as a leader not of power, but of principle. The faces before her were no longer full of skepticism or mockery. They were filled with respect, even awe. They knew the truth now. They knew what humanity had done, what they had fought for, and how they had changed the course of galactic history. As Riley spoke, her words carried a weight that resonated with every being in the room. "You laughed," she began, her voice calm and clear, "because you didn't understand us." The room fell silent. She could feel the weight of those words, knowing how far they had come. She paused for a moment, letting the silence stretch. "You stopped laughing when we showed you who we really are." The room exploded in applause, not because it was expected, but because it was deserved. Humans had not just proven their strength, they had proven their integrity, their courage, and their ability to bring about real change. The speech wasn't just the end of a trial, it was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where humanity's voice was no longer dismissed or ignored. It was a voice that would echo across the stars, a beacon for justice, for fairness, and for the idea that even the youngest species could stand tall and make their mark. The new alliance, with Earth now at its center, promised a future where cooperation replaced control, where peace replaced war, and where every species, regardless of age or power, could thrive in mutual respect. Riley stepped back from the podium, her eyes meeting those of the delegates. She knew that humanity had not just earned their place among the stars, they had earned their place in history, the legacy of Earth, of the humans who had laughed when they were told they could not win, was now one of inspiration. The galaxy would never forget what had happened. And as the assembly began to disperse, Earth's flag was raised in the center of the Grand Hall, a symbol of a new dawn. From that moment on, humanity's voice would no longer be a whisper in the dark. It would echo across the stars, a powerful reminder of what could be achieved when determination, honor, and a commitment to truth overcame all odds.